We are back with our big board, and we begin with some good news for Melania Trump. A new poll out from CNN shows the majority of Americans, 52%, now have a favorable view of the First Lady. That's up 16 points since Inauguration Day. Let's talk about it now with Anita McBride, who is Chief of Staff to Laura Bush in the White House. Anita, that is a pretty nice spike for Melania. How do you explain it?
Well, good morning, George. Thanks for having me. I think, this doesn't surprise me because First Ladies tend to be much more popular than the President of the United States anyway. And I think also, let's remember, we didn't see much of her on the campaign, and her first public pronouncement after election was that she wasn't going to move here. So we didn't know what to expect. But what we have seen since inauguration is that she is comfortable in the role, and she's doing what she needs to do, and she's defining the position as it suits her. And I think people are responding to that.
But Anita, she is living in New York, far
Right.
from the White House. Do you think that's had any impact on how people are viewing her?
Well, I think it seems to be working for her so far. I mean, we didn't know how that would affect her ability to do the job. But the public events that we have seen her do, especially hosting foreign dignitaries, and even her off-the-record visit to Children's Hospital last week, and then her event yesterday, and then hosting presidential guests in the box for the address to Congress. She seems very comfortable in the role.
She does.
I think.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I think the one thing to your poll, though, about the difference between men and women, there's still a lot of women in this country that are wary of the president. And so they are not quite ready to accept Mrs. Trump, obviously the woman who's closest to him.
And she's done a few things, as you said, but she hasn't quite struck out yet with any issues of her own. And during the campaign, she talked a little bit about taking on cyberbullying.
Right.
Do you expect to see more of that going forward?
Well, I do think that she has been saying a lot about wanting to work on issues that affect women and children. And even at yesterday's lunch, she mentioned something about international education. And I think what's going to be important there, if that is an issue that she wants to work on, is how they will be able to square that with the president's budget for the State Department, which really cuts a lot of those international education programs.
Yeah, that could be difficult for her. Okay, Anita, thanks very much.
Thanks, Anita. And now to that mid-air mishap. A Hawaiian Airlines flight diverted to LAX on Wednesday after a 66-year-old passenger got into a dispute with the crew member over the cost of an in-flight blanket. David Curley joins us now. So, David, authorities say that the man was upset because he was cold and he asked for a blanket. They said that's going to be $12. The airline calling him unruly. Tell us what happened. What did the guy say that got him kicked off the plane?
So it was a morning flight, Amy. It was from Las Vegas to Hawaii, and several hundred miles off California. The pilot decides to turn around the aircraft and goes back to LAX. So the 66-year-old man did get cold. He asked the flight attendant for a blanket. The flight attendant said, as you mentioned, it'll cost you $12. That upset him. He asked for the number for corporate. And then he said, I'd like to take someone, according to authorities, behind the woodshed. And that set off alarm bells, apparently, and that's when the flight attendant notified the cockpit.
But behind the woodshed, kind of a colorful language, I guess, doesn't sound like a very serious threat.
Yeah, here's what we don't know, George. We don't know what kind of language he used, whether he was very intense, loud, whether it was calm. We don't know any of those things. And so we have no idea whether the flight attendant may or may not have overreacted. But the flight attendant did call the captain, and that set off this series. But this kind of reflects back to, everyone feels like the airlines are nickel and diming you. You got to pay for a bag, you got to pay for a meal, you got to pay for overhead space. So it kind of fits into that narrative.
And David, though, they were going to Hawaii. I'm feeling for all the passengers on that plane who thought they were headed to vacation and had to turn around. What is the standard for kicking someone off the plane? Is it at a flight attendant's discretion?
No, it's up to the captain. He is in control of that aircraft, and this is what Hawaiian Airlines is saying is, listen, the captain's in the cockpit, usually with the doors closed and locked. He gets a call from his crew and says, listen, I have a problem with the passenger, and I think we should
Couldn't he have
get
just
this
said, give him
passenger
the
off
blanket?
Well, the captain may not have even known that. The flight attendant may have just said, listen, I have an unruly passenger. The captain makes a decision. I've got a 5-hour flight.
Point.
I don't want an unruly passenger on board. I'm going to L.A.
All right.
Amy wants some sun. That's all right.
I just think they should have given the guy the blanket. All right. David, Anita, thank you so much.